Sexual assault behind closed doors, how one victim fought for justice. In today's video, we uncover a harrowing tale of sexual assault that took place in a hospital. A story that will shake you to the core as one brave survivor fights for justice after enduring a horrific experience. Don't miss the powerful journey of this survivor and the battle for truth. If this story moved you, make sure to hit like and subscribe to Stories TH for more heart-wrenching tales like this. In a quiet, dimly lit hospital room, a sense of unease hung heavy in the air as Emily's family clung to the fragile hope that one day she would awaken from her deep, 5-year-long coma. It had been a harrowing experience, watching her lie motionless, trapped in a world beyond their reach. Emily had been a bright, determined young woman on the cusp of graduation when the accident struck, leaving her body broken and her mind lost to the unconscious world. As the years passed, the regular visitors dwindled, leaving only her devoted mother, Sarah, by her side, struggling with both the grief and the endless uncertainty. The hospital staff had become more accustomed to the sight of Emily's unmoving form, but Sarah couldn't give up, never relinquishing the hope that her daughter might someday open her eyes. Yet, just as the family began to brace for the worst, a shocking revelation would turn their world upside down. One morning, an experienced nurse named Valerie, while making her rounds, noticed something startling about Emily's condition. Her abdomen was inexplicably swollen, something that had not been present before. This discovery prompted immediate tests, and soon the unthinkable truth emerged. Emily, the comatose patient, was pregnant. The news sent shockwaves through the hospital, leaving everyone, from doctors to nurses, in stunned disbelief. How could someone in a coma for 5 years possibly conceive a child? As the investigation began, Sarah was left reeling, questioning everything she thought she knew. Who could have done this to her daughter? Her mind raced with anger and fear. The hospital's administration quickly launched an internal investigation, and the police were brought in. The truth was slowly beginning to unravel, with suspicion falling on Dr. Richard, a senior member of the hospital staff who had been in frequent contact with Emily during her coma. Tension and paranoia gripped the hospital as everyone involved in Emily's care became a potential suspect. As the days dragged on, Emily's family grew increasingly desperate to uncover the truth, but the questions surrounding her pregnancy only seemed to multiply. How could something like this happen under the noses of the very people entrusted with her care? The deeper the investigation went, the more sinister the revelations became. Eventually, it was discovered that the father of Emily's child was none other than Dr. Richard himself, who had abused his position of power and trust for his own malicious purposes. The discovery was met with a combination of outrage, disbelief, and sorrow. How could a trusted medical professional betray his patient in such a horrific way? The shock was not limited to Emily's family alone, as the hospital staff and the community at large grappled with the betrayal of trust. In the days that followed, Emily's family found themselves at the center of a battle for justice. With Emily still unconscious, unable to speak for herself, it was up to her mother, Sarah, and her best friend, Claire, to ensure that the man responsible would face consequences for his actions. The case took a dark turn when it was revealed that this was not the first time Dr. Richard had preyed on a vulnerable patient. The discovery of another woman who had been similarly victimized by him added another layer of horror to the situation. The story continued to unfold in a chilling manner as the police gathered evidence and witnesses came forward. Emily, still in a coma, had become the key witness in this harrowing tale of power, abuse, and exploitation. With the DNA test results confirming Richard's involvement, the case reached its climax. Richard, now a suspect, attempted to flee the country, knowing that his actions were about to be exposed. The sense of urgency and fear grew as the authorities raced to track him down and bring him to justice. In a final twist, as Richard tried to escape, he was caught, and the truth was laid bare for all to see. The trial that followed was a long and grueling process. But with Emily's testimony and the overwhelming evidence, Richard was convicted of his crimes. Emily's courage in the face of unimaginable trauma became a beacon of strength for her family and friends. The emotional toll of the entire ordeal was profound, but Emily's determination to stand up for herself and her future served as a powerful reminder of the importance of justice and resilience. Despite everything she had endured, she found a way to rise above the darkness and reclaim her life. In the end, the trial marked the beginning of a new chapter for Emily. Though the scars of her past would never fully fade, she found strength in the love and support of her family, and with time, she learned to heal. The most important message that emerged from this harrowing journey was that justice would always prevail, and that even in the darkest moments, it was possible to find hope and strength. Emily's story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the unwavering determination to protect those we love, no matter the cost. The support of family, friends, and the pursuit of justice ultimately triumphed over the darkness, and Emily began her slow journey toward healing, no longer a victim, but a survivor. In a quiet, dimly lit room at St. Mary's Hospital, Helen's parents, Sarah and Michael, sat by their daughter's bedside, holding on to the hope that one day she would awaken from the deep coma that had kept her trapped for 5 years. Helen had been a bright and ambitious young woman, a star student ready to graduate and begin her adult life, when a tragic accident shattered everything. The car accident had left her body broken and her mind lost in the unconscious realm, unable to fight for herself, unable to speak. In the beginning, her family and friends came frequently, offering support, praying for her recovery, and holding on to the belief that one day Helen would open her eyes. But as the years passed, the visits slowed, the hopes faded, and the days grew long for Sarah, whose love for her daughter kept her at the hospital every day. She stayed with her daughter, never wavering in her belief that one day Helen would wake up. Despite the passage of time, Sarah remained by Helen's side, praying for a miracle. Yet, as time wore on, the question began to arise: would Helen ever wake up? While the world around her moved on, Helen's body remained unmoving, still and lifeless in the sterile hospital room. Sarah, however, could not let go of her daughter. She never abandoned her faith, never gave up. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. Then, one night, as Sarah sat by her daughter's bed, a nurse named Valerie, who had been working at the hospital for years, noticed something strange. It was during one of her routine checks that Valerie saw a startling change. Helen's abdomen was swollen. This was new, and it caught Valerie's attention immediately. Her heart skipped a beat as she examined the patient more closely. Could this be possible? Could someone in a coma for 5 years become pregnant? Valerie didn't know, but she immediately contacted Dr. Andrew, a physician who had been taking care of Helen, asking for his assistance in checking her condition. Dr. Andrew, a young but experienced physician, hurried over to check on Helen. As soon as he placed his hand on her stomach, his expression changed, revealing the first signs of shock. This was not just a medical anomaly. There was something deeply wrong here. He instructed immediate tests to determine what had happened, but even the doctors couldn't explain how this could be possible. The shock was overwhelming for everyone involved. The doctors, nurses, and especially Helen's family were at a complete loss. Helen, who had been comatose for 5 years, was 6 months pregnant. No one could fathom how this had happened, and the questions only piled up. How could she be pregnant if she had been unconscious the entire time? Who could have done this to her? The investigation quickly became a matter of urgency. The police were brought in to investigate, and St. Mary's Hospital became the center of a criminal inquiry. The staff, who had cared for Helen during her comatose years, were suddenly under suspicion. Everyone who had access to her room became a potential suspect. Richard, a senior doctor at the hospital, was among those who had been in close contact with Helen, but no one knew the horrifying truth that would soon come to light. As the investigation continued, Richard's actions grew more suspicious. He had been in and out of Helen's room frequently over the years, and rumors began to circulate. Could this trusted physician be the one responsible for this unspeakable crime? With each passing day, Helen's family became more desperate for answers. Sarah, heartbroken and confused, could not comprehend how someone could take advantage of her daughter in such a horrific way. Claire, Helen's best friend, was equally devastated. She had been with Helen through thick and thin, and now she was determined to find out the truth. The police began their inquiry, and soon, the suspicions surrounding Richard became impossible to ignore. The DNA results revealed the horrifying truth. Richard was the father of the baby. The shock of the discovery sent ripples through the entire hospital. How could a respected doctor abuse his position in such a monstrous way? He had been entrusted with the care of vulnerable patients, and yet he had betrayed that trust in the most unimaginable way. As the investigation continued, it became clear that Richard had been doing this for years, abusing his position and taking advantage of vulnerable patients. He had been a predator, hiding in plain sight. With the evidence mounting against him, it was only a matter of time before he was caught. The police issued a warrant for his arrest, and soon after, Richard was taken into custody. The trial that followed was a long and grueling one, but Helen's testimony, despite her being in a coma for so long, became the cornerstone of the case. Her bravery, her strength, and her determination to seek justice for herself and others became the driving force behind the legal proceedings. The trial was a turning point. Richard was convicted of his crimes, and Helen's family, along with the other victims who came forward, finally saw justice. But for Helen, the battle was far from over. The emotional toll of the entire ordeal was immense, and the trauma she had experienced would never fully fade. She had been violated, not just physically, but emotionally and psychologically. The consequences of Richard's actions left a deep scar on Helen's soul. But she was not broken. Helen's resilience became a symbol of hope for others. Despite everything she had endured, she stood strong, determined to reclaim her life. After Richard was convicted and sent to prison, Helen began the long journey toward healing. It was not an easy road. The emotional weight of the experience was profound, and at times, Helen questioned how she could ever move on from what had happened. But with the support of her family and friends, she found the strength to push forward. Slowly but surely, Helen began to rebuild her life. She had faced unimaginable pain, but she refused to let that pain define her. As time passed, Helen learned to accept the baby she carried. At first, it was an overwhelming and painful reminder of everything she had been through. But over time, she came to realize that the child was not responsible for the pain she had suffered. This child was an innocent life, and it would be her role to protect and care for it. With the support of her mother, Sarah, and her best friend, Claire, Helen slowly found the courage to face her future. Helen's story is one of unimaginable horror, but it is also a story of survival, strength, and resilience. It teaches us that even in the darkest moments, there's always a possibility for justice and healing. It reminds us that no matter how deeply we are wounded, we can still find the strength to rise again. Helen's journey may have been filled with pain, but it also marked the beginning of a new chapter in her life, a chapter in which she reclaimed her power and embraced the love and support of those around her. The most important message is this: the truth will always come to light, and justice, no matter how long it takes, will prevail. In the quiet halls of St. Mary's Hospital, a story of betrayal, survival, and justice unfolded that would captivate the hearts of many. Helen, a young woman with a promising future, was left fighting for her life after a horrific car accident. Her family, devastated and desperate for hope, clung to the belief that one day she would awaken. For 5 long years, they waited, never giving up on their daughter, but the days were filled with despair as Helen remained in a coma. Her parents, Sarah and Michael, stayed by her side, offering what little support they could, hoping for a miracle. As time passed, the visitors slowed, and the hope of her waking up seemed to fade. But Sarah never gave up. She spent every moment she could in the hospital, praying for her daughter to return to her. The pain of watching her daughter motionless in the sterile hospital room weighed heavily on her heart. But Sarah's devotion to her daughter kept her fighting. The rest of the world continued its march forward, but Sarah stayed beside Helen, unwavering, even as the years dragged on. Then, one fateful night, the unimaginable occurred. Nurse Valerie, a seasoned professional who had worked at St. Mary's for many years, noticed something that no one could have predicted. As she conducted her usual rounds, she observed a disturbing change in Helen's condition. Helen's abdomen had noticeably expanded, which was completely abnormal for a coma patient who had been lying still for so long. Valerie, in a state of confusion and concern, immediately called for Dr. Andrew, the young physician responsible for Helen's care. The moment Andrew touched Helen's stomach, his face fell. Suffs. The change was undeniable. Helen was pregnant. This was an impossible situation, and no one could understand how it happened. Helen had been in a coma for 5 years, and yet somehow she was carrying a child. The discovery of her pregnancy left everyone in shock, and it raised an even more horrifying question. Who was responsible? The discovery sent shockwaves through the hospital. The police were immediately called, and an investigation into the matter began. All those who had access to Helen's room were placed under suspicion, including doctors, nurses, and even the janitors. The case was a mystery that seemed unsolvable, and yet the truth had to come to light. Among those suspected was Richard, a respected senior doctor at the hospital. He had been in and out of Helen's room for years, often at night, when others weren't watching. As the investigation unfolded, the hospital staff realized they were dealing with something much darker than anyone could have anticipated. Richard had been abusing his position for years, taking advantage of vulnerable patients under his care. The hospital, which had long been a place of healing, had become the setting for a nightmare. Helen's family, especially Sarah, could hardly comprehend the horror that had been unfolding right under their noses. The pain of learning the truth was unbearable. Sarah clung to the hope that the police could find justice for her daughter, but the emotional toll was immense. Claire, Helen's best friend, was equally devastated. She had been there for Helen throughout her life, and now she was determined to help find the person responsible. With the police now involved, the investigation gained traction, and soon it was clear that Richard had been the one to violate Helen, while she was unconscious, trapped in a body that couldn't defend itself. As the investigation progressed, the horrifying truth became more evident. The DNA results confirmed what everyone feared. Richard was the father of Helen's child. The revelation was a gut punch to everyone involved. The staff at the hospital were shaken to their core. How could someone they trusted, someone who had sworn an oath to protect and heal, turn out to be a predator? Richard's actions were inexcusable, and the pain caused by his betrayal was immeasurable. The police acted swiftly to arrest Richard, but the journey to justice was just beginning. The trial that followed was a long and arduous process. Helen, still recovering from the trauma, found herself forced to confront the darkest parts of her past. Her strength and courage became apparent when she agreed to testify. Her testimony, despite the emotional strain, became the cornerstone of the case against Richard. As the trial progressed, it became clear that Richard had been operating with impunity for years. He had manipulated and abused his position of power, taking advantage of vulnerable patients without anyone noticing. But Helen's bravery and determination to seek justice for herself and for all the other victims gave her the strength to face her abuser in court. The emotional toll of the trial was immense, but with each passing day, the truth came closer to being revealed. Helen's resilience was tested, and yet she stood strong. As Richard's lawyer attempted to discredit her testimony, Helen held firm. She knew what she had experienced, and she was not about to let Richard escape the consequences of his actions. The jury, swayed by the overwhelming evidence and Helen's powerful testimony, convicted Richard. He was sentenced to life in prison, where he would no longer be able to hurt anyone else. However, the journey to healing was far from over. Helen, despite the victory in court, still faced an emotional battle. The trauma of what had happened to her would never fully fade, and she struggled with how to move forward. The pregnancy, though not her choice, had left her in a state of emotional turmoil. The child, innocent in all of this, was a reminder of the horror she had experienced. But over time, with the support of her family and friends, Helen began to find peace. She realized that while the child was a reminder of her trauma, it was also an opportunity for healing. The child was not to blame for what happened to her, and she made the decision to embrace motherhood, to care for and love the child that had been forced upon her. Helen's journey of healing was not easy, and it was marked by moments of doubt and pain. But with the support of her mother, Sarah, and her best friend, Claire, she found the strength to move forward. Slowly, Helen began to rebuild her life. She learned to live again, to love again, and to forgive herself for what had happened. The strength that had once been taken from her was now being restored. And as she looked toward the future, she knew that the road ahead would be long and challenging, but she was no longer afraid. She was ready to face whatever came her way, knowing that she had already overcome the darkest chapter of her life. The story of Helen is a powerful reminder of the strength of the human spirit. It shows that even in the face of unimaginable pain, it is possible to find the courage to stand up, to fight for justice, and to reclaim one's life. It also highlights the importance of family and friendship in overcoming life's most difficult challenges. Through the love and support of her family and friends, Helen was able to navigate the darkest moments of her life and emerge stronger, more resilient, and ready to embrace a future of healing and hope. Her story is a testament to the fact that no matter how deep the wound, there is always the potential for recovery and renewal. Justice, no matter how long it takes, will always prevail. In a quiet hospital room, the echoes of desperation and hope blended into a tragic story of survival and betrayal. Helen, a young woman with a bright future, found herself trapped in a coma for 5 years after a brutal accident. Her family, devastated but determined, kept a vigil beside her, never giving up hope that one day she would wake up. Despite the endless days and sleepless nights, her parents, Michael and Sarah, stayed by her side, offering what support they could, while her friends, including Claire, visited her occasionally, offering what little comfort they could. The pain of seeing Helen motionless, as if the world had stopped for her, was overwhelming, and yet Sarah never wavered in her commitment. The hospital room, once filled with visitors and conversations of hope, gradually became quieter. Friends faded, and the hospital staff carried on with their duties, while Helen's family remained her only constant. Michael did his best to keep the family afloat, working long hours to ensure that Helen's treatment continued, but even he began to feel the weight of their prolonged ordeal. As the years passed, the hope that Helen would wake up began to fade, but Sarah, with the strength of a mother's love, continued to hold on to the belief that one day her daughter would return to them. For 5 long years, the hospital became Helen's home, and her family's vigil continued. One day, however, the unimaginable happened. Nurse Valerie, making her routine rounds, noticed something startling and unnatural about Helen's condition. Her abdomen had started to grow, and it was more pronounced than it should have been for someone in a coma. Alarmed, Valerie immediately called for Dr. Andrew, the physician responsible for Helen's care. He too was taken aback by what he saw, and it quickly became clear that Helen was pregnant. This revelation was nothing short of shocking. Helen had been in a coma for 5 years, and there was no conceivable way for her to become pregnant. The discovery triggered a whirlwind of confusion, disbelief, and suspicion within the hospital, as the question loomed, who had done this to her? The news spread quickly throughout St. Mary's Hospital, and as the realization set in, a sense of dread filled the air. Whispers echoed in the hallways as doctors and nurses exchanged shocked glances. The entire hospital, which had always been a place of healing, was now the setting for an unimaginable crime. The police were called in to investigate, and the search for the culprit began. The focus immediately turned to those who had regular access to Helen's room, her doctors, nurses, and hospital staff. Every single person who had contact with Helen during her 5-year coma was scrutinized. The only thing everyone could agree on was that someone in the hospital had abused their power and violated Helen in her most vulnerable state. As the investigation continued, suspicion quickly fell on Richard, a senior doctor at the hospital. Richard had been known to frequent Helen's room at night under the guise of checking on her condition, but his behavior had always been somewhat unsettling. He was calm and collected, but something about his presence raised red flags for some of the staff. His access to Helen's room and his odd behavior at night made him a prime suspect. As the investigation intensified, it became apparent that Richard had been abusing his position for years, taking advantage of vulnerable, unconscious patients. He was skilled in hiding his actions, manipulating those around him, and using his medical expertise to cover his tracks. Sarah, heartbroken and enraged by the news, refused to let Richard escape the consequences of his actions. She demanded justice for her daughter, determined to see him punished for what he had done. Claire, too, was filled with anger and disbelief. She had been Helen's closest friend for years and was now faced with the horrifying realization that the man she had trusted had been responsible for the unimaginable harm that had been done to her best friend. Together, Sarah and Claire worked tirelessly with the police, pushing for Richard to be arrested and held accountable. The hospital staff, too, were shaken by the events that had unfolded. Valerie, the nurse who had discovered the pregnancy, had suspected something was wrong with Richard for some time. She had always felt that he was hiding something, but she had never imagined it would come to this. As the investigation progressed, the evidence against Richard mounted, and the truth began to surface. He had been preying on his vulnerable patients for years, and now it seemed his past had finally caught up with him. The DNA test confirmed that Richard was the father of Helen's unborn child. This revelation left everyone stunned, and the hospital was left grappling with the horrifying reality that one of their own had committed such a crime. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Richard maintained his innocence, but his actions were undeniable. The case was clear-cut, and it was only a matter of time before he would be brought to justice. The trial that followed was long and difficult, but Helen's bravery and strength were evident. She chose to testify, despite the emotional toll it took on her. Her decision to speak out in court, to stand up and face her abuser, was a testament to her courage. Her testimony was crucial to the case, and with the support of her family and friends, she managed to hold herself together during the proceedings. Her words were powerful, and they ultimately helped to convict Richard. The evidence was overwhelming, and the jury found Richard guilty of sexual assault and abuse of power. He was sentenced to life in prison, where he would no longer be able to hurt anyone else. However, despite the conviction, Helen's journey was far from over. The trauma of what she had endured weighed heavily on her, and she struggled with the emotional aftermath. The child she carried, though innocent, was a constant reminder of the abuse she had suffered. Helen found herself torn between loving and caring for the child, and grappling with the emotional toll of what had happened. The road to healing was long, and it was filled with moments of doubt and pain. But with the unwavering support of her family and friends, Helen began to find the strength to move forward. Slowly, Helen started to rebuild her life. She learned to accept the child she had been forced to carry and found the strength to love the baby, despite the painful memories associated with the pregnancy. She realized that the child was not to blame for what had happened to her, and that it was her responsibility to provide the love and care that every child deserves. As time passed, Helen began to heal. She rediscovered her own sense of self-worth and reclaimed her life from the darkness that had once consumed her. Through the love and support of her family, Helen learned that it was possible to move forward, even after experiencing the worst that life had to offer. Helen's story is a powerful reminder of the strength of the human spirit. It shows that even in the face of unimaginable pain and suffering, it is possible to find the courage to stand up, seek justice, and rebuild one's life. It is also a testament to the importance of family and friends in the healing process. Through their support, Helen was able to face the darkest moments of her life and come out stronger on the other side. Her story is a beacon of hope for anyone who has ever faced trauma and adversity, reminding us that no matter how difficult the journey, it is possible to heal and move forward. In a dimly lit hospital room, a story unfolded that no one could have predicted, a story that would send shockwaves through an entire community. Helen, a young woman with a bright future, was struck by tragedy when a horrific accident left her in a coma for 5 long years. Her family, especially her mother Sarah, never gave up on her. Every day, they held on to the fragile thread of hope that one day Helen would wake up. The hospital room became a place of quiet prayer and love, as Sarah, with a heart full of love and pain, stayed by her daughter's side. Helen's father, Michael, worked tirelessly to support the family, trying to earn enough money for Helen's medical bills while watching his daughter slip away into a world of unconsciousness. Over the years, the initial surge of visitors and well-wishes slowly faded, and only a few close friends like Claire continued to visit. Despite their unwavering support, the emotional toll of waiting began to wear on everyone. Helen remained motionless, and time seemed to stand still in that hospital room. Her life, frozen in time, left everyone in a state of suspension. But it was not until a strange and horrifying discovery was made that the true nightmare of this story began to unfold. One day, while performing her routine rounds, Nurse Valerie noticed something unexpected. Helen's abdomen had grown significantly. This was an unusual and alarming finding, especially given Helen's condition. In a state of shock, Valerie called Dr. Andrew, the attending physician, to examine her. The moment he placed his hand on Helen's stomach, his face changed, and his body stiffened. Something was wrong. Helen was pregnant, despite being in a coma for 5 years. The news hit like a thunderclap, and the question everyone was asking was, how? This revelation sent the hospital into a state of confusion, disbelief, and fear. How could a woman in a coma, unable to move, speak, or make any decisions, become pregnant? The news spread like wildfire through the hospital, and whispers filled the hallways, creating an air of suspense and dread. Sarah, already devastated by her daughter's coma, now faced a new, unimaginable horror. Her daughter, in her most vulnerable state, had been violated. The question that haunted everyone was who could have done such a thing. Sarah was beside herself with grief and anger. She demanded answers, vowing to find the person responsible for the unimaginable act against her daughter. Claire, Helen's best friend, also joined the fight, supporting Sarah and urging her to seek justice. The hospital, once a place of healing, was now a crime scene. The police were immediately called in to investigate. The search for the person responsible began with a clear focus on those who had had access to Helen's room doctors, nurses, and anyone who could have been in contact with her during those 5 long years. As the investigation proceeded, the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in disturbing ways. Everyone was horrified by the possibility that someone in the hospital could have used their position of power to take advantage of a vulnerable patient. The investigation quickly pointed to Richard, a senior doctor at the hospital. He had access to Helen's room and had frequently visited her, often at night. He had always been calm, professional, and well-liked by most of the staff, but there were whispers that something wasn't quite right about him. Richard had a history of secrecy, and there were rumors that he had crossed ethical lines before. As the investigation grew more intense, Richard's behavior became more suspicious. Sarah, Claire, and the police began to connect the dots, and the truth slowly began to emerge. Richard had been exploiting his position of trust, and he had used Helen's vulnerability to satisfy his own twisted desires. The DNA test confirmed the worst. Richard was the father of the child Helen carried. This revelation sent shockwaves through the hospital, leaving everyone in disbelief and horror. How could this man, a trusted medical professional, have done such a thing? Sarah, consumed by grief and anger, demanded justice. She refused to let Richard get away with what he had done to her daughter. Claire, too, was horrified by the man she had once trusted, and together they worked with the police to gather evidence and build a case. The medical staff, including Nurse Valerie, rallied behind Sarah, determined to see justice served. The investigation uncovered a disturbing pattern. Richard had been taking advantage of other vulnerable patients, but his actions had gone unnoticed for years. He had used his medical knowledge to manipulate the system, covering his tracks and avoiding suspicion. But this time, the truth could no longer be hidden. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, Richard continued to deny his involvement. He claimed that there had been a medical error, that the pregnancy was a result of some strange coincidence. But the DNA evidence told a different story. The police were determined to bring him to justice, and the trial that followed was a long, difficult journey. But Helen's courage in speaking out and testifying in court was crucial. She bravely faced her abuser, despite the emotional toll it took on her. Her testimony, along with the DNA evidence, was enough to convict Richard. The jury found him guilty of sexual assault and abuse of power. He was sentenced to life in prison, where he would no longer be able to harm anyone else. However, Helen's journey was far from over. The trauma of what she had endured weighed heavily on her, and she struggled with the emotional and psychological scars left by the abuse. The pregnancy, though innocent, was a constant reminder of the horror she had experienced. Helen found herself torn between loving the child and confronting the painful memories associated with the pregnancy. But with the support of her family, friends, and the medical professionals who had helped her, Helen began to heal. The road was long, and there were many difficult moments, but Helen learned to accept the child she had been forced to carry. She found strength in the love and support of those around her, and with time, she began to rebuild her life. Helen's story is a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit. But the road to justice was not easy. Richard's lawyer tried every tactic in the book to discredit Helen's testimony, including questioning the validity of the DNA test and trying to create doubt in the jury's mind about Helen's memories due to her time in a coma. Despite these efforts, Helen stood firm. She remembered the cold, violating touch of her attacker. She remembered his voice, Richard's voice, whispering cruel words in her ear as he took advantage of her helpless state. The courtroom was still as Helen spoke those words. She was unwavering in her resolve, and the truth rang out loud and clear. She was not just a victim, she was a fighter, and she would see that justice was done. In the end, the evidence was undeniable. Richard was convicted of sexual assault, abuse of power, and tampering with hospital records. He was sentenced to life in prison, where he would no longer be able to harm anyone. But for Helen, the battle wasn't over. She still had to come to terms with the pregnancy, with the child she had been forced to carry, and the emotional toll that came with it. She didn't want this child. She hated the reminder of the nightmare she had lived through. But with the love and support of her family, friends, and the doctors who had helped her, she slowly began to heal. The road was long and filled with challenges, but Helen learned to accept the child that was now part of her life. It wasn't the child's fault, after all, and though it would never replace the pain, it was a reminder that she was still alive, still capable of love, and still able to choose her own future. Helen's story is one of immense pain, but also immense strength. She faced unimaginable horrors, yet she refused to let them define her. Her courage, her determination, and her ability to stand up in the face of adversity make her a symbol of resilience. She fought not just for herself, but for every person who had ever been silenced by fear or shame. Her story is a reminder that justice may take time, but it will always prevail. It is also a testament to the power of love and support from those around us. With family, friends, and a determination to survive, Helen was able to rebuild her life, to find meaning in the chaos, and to emerge stronger than ever before. It is a reminder to us all that no matter how dark the journey may seem, there is always hope for a new beginning. Helen's journey through darkness, betrayal, and ultimately healing is a story of profound pain, resilience, and the pursuit of justice. The story begins with a tragic accident when a young, vibrant Helen was struck by a speeding truck, leaving her in a coma for 5 long years. Her parents, Sarah and Michael, were consumed with worry, clinging to the hope that one day their daughter would wake up and emerge from her deep, unyielding slumber. Sarah, a mother's love unwavering, spent every day by Helen's side, her life revolving around the hospital room where time seemed to stand still. Family and friends, including Claire, her best friend, came to visit. But as the years dragged on, fewer and fewer people came. They couldn't bear the waiting, the uncertainty of Helen's fate. Sarah, too, felt the toll of her dedication, her body becoming gaunt from sleepless nights, but she never stopped hoping. Then came the shocking discovery that would change everything. After 5 years of no progress, a nurse named Valerie, performing her usual rounds, noticed something strange. Helen's abdomen had grown. This revelation was incomprehensible. A woman in a coma for 5 years couldn't possibly be pregnant, could she? The discovery set in motion an investigation that would shake the hospital to its core. Dr. Andrew, a young physician, confirmed the unexpected pregnancy. The results were clear. Helen was about 6 months pregnant, though the impossible nature of the situation only raised more questions. How could this be? Sarah, her heart breaking, was left in a state of disbelief. She could hardly comprehend the horror of what was happening. How could her daughter be carrying a child when she had been unconscious for so long? The investigation revealed that Helen had been violated during her coma, and the father of the child was none other than Dr. Richard, a respected senior doctor at the hospital. This discovery sent shockwaves through the hospital as it became clear that someone had abused their power and authority. It was a betrayal of the highest order. Sarah, Claire, and the police began to piece together the timeline, the moments of access to Helen's room, the suspicious behavior of Dr. Richard. As more evidence came to light, including a DNA test confirming Richard as the father, the investigation took a darker turn. It wasn't just about the pregnancy. It was about what had been done to Helen during her vulnerability. How had Richard managed to keep this secret for so long? The hospital becomes a second home, with Sarah by Helen's side day after day, her world shrinking to the sterile white walls that separate her from the daughter she so desperately wants to see alive again. As months and then years go by, friends and family come less and less, unable to endure the long wait. But Sarah stays strong, refusing to leave her daughter's side, her love for Helen unwavering despite the toll it takes on her own well-being. During these years, Sarah holds on to the hope that Helen will wake up, but the situation becomes increasingly dire. Then, something shocking occurs that no one could have anticipated. While checking on Helen, Nurse Valerie notices something unusual. Helen's abdomen has begun to grow. Given Helen's deep coma, this discovery seems impossible. She has been unconscious for 5 years. How could she be pregnant? Valerie's shock leads to an immediate investigation. The next day, Dr. Andrew, a young physician, confirms the pregnancy, and the tests show that Helen is 6 months pregnant. The shock ripples through the hospital, and Sarah, already on the edge, is plunged into an even deeper state of disbelief and despair. How could this be possible? Sarah is left with no answers, only an overwhelming sense of betrayal and horror. Her daughter, who has been comatose for years, is carrying a child, and someone must be responsible. The news spreads quickly throughout St. Mary's Hospital, and everyone is shocked. Whispers fill the hallways. How could this happen? Who would do something like this to a coma patient? The hospital staff, particularly the medical team that had been involved in Helen's care, begins to look at each other with suspicion. They all had access to Helen's room, but no one could imagine the horrifying truth. The police are called in, and the investigation begins. As the investigation progresses, it becomes clear that the truth will be even darker than anyone could have imagined. Helen's pregnancy was not a miracle, nor was it the result of any medical anomaly. It was the result of a terrible crime. It is soon revealed that the father of the baby is Dr. Richard, a senior physician at the hospital. The realization hits like a bombshell. Richard, someone trusted by both the hospital and Helen's family, has been violating his position of power for years. The accusations against him are overwhelming. He has sexually assaulted Helen while she was in a coma. As the evidence mounts, Sarah is forced to confront the unimaginable, that her own daughter, lying in a coma and unable to fight back, was subjected to such cruelty. The news devastates her, and she is filled with rage and sorrow. She cannot understand how Richard, someone who was supposed to care for her daughter, could commit such a heinous act. But Sarah's determination to see justice done is stronger than her pain. The police, led by Detective Samuel, quickly move into action, gathering all the evidence they can. DNA tests are performed, confirming that Richard is the father of the child. Security footage, once erased, is recovered, and Valerie, the brave nurse, risks everything to expose Richard's actions. She takes photos of the deleted footage and sends them to the authorities. But despite the mounting evidence, Richard remains calm and confident, believing that he can outsmart the system. He attempts to destroy the evidence, manipulate the truth, and use his position of power to escape accountability. He tries to flee the country, but the police are hot on his trail. Every step Richard takes, the walls close in on him. Meanwhile, Helen, still in a coma, remains unaware of the gravity of what has happened to her. As the investigation heats up, Sarah and her family cling to the hope that one day Helen will wake up and be able to help bring Richard to justice. But waking from a coma after 5 years is no small feat. It's a delicate process, and it requires not only physical recovery, but also emotional strength. Helen's family, especially Sarah, continues to be by her side, hoping that their love and support will be enough to bring her back. The turning point comes when, after 5 years, Helen begins to show signs of awakening. It is a slow and difficult process, but her consciousness begins to return. At first, it is only small gestures, slight movements of her fingers, a faint groan, and then the smallest twitch of her lips. But soon, her eyes begin to flutter open, and Sarah is there, by her side, watching as her daughter slowly returns to the world. The joy is overwhelming, but it is mixed with the anguish of what Helen will soon discover. When Helen finally wakes up, she is confused and disoriented. She doesn't understand why she's in the hospital, and her body feels foreign to her. The first thing she notices, though, is her swollen belly. The investigation into Helen's pregnancy becomes a desperate search for answers, and the police are quickly brought in. Detective Samuel, along with his colleague, Inspector James, take the lead in the investigation. They question everyone who had access to Helen's room over the past 5 years, starting with the staff at St. Mary's Hospital. The suspicion falls on those who had the greatest access to her, the doctors and nurses responsible for her care. As the investigation unfolds, it becomes clear that the one person with the means, opportunity, and motive to exploit Helen's vulnerability is Dr. Richard. He is a senior physician at the hospital, respected by his colleagues and trusted by the hospital administration. Yet behind his polished, professional exterior lies a predator. It is revealed that Richard has been sexually assaulting Helen while she was in a coma, taking advantage of her inability to fight back. The revelation shocks everyone involved, and the truth is enough to bring even the most seasoned professionals to their knees. The police's investigation into Dr. Richard's actions intensifies, and the evidence against him starts to mount. The DNA test confirms that he is the father of Helen's child, and a careful review of the hospital's security footage reveals that Richard was a regular presence in Helen's room late at night. However, the most crucial piece of evidence comes from Nurse Valerie, who, despite the fear of repercussions, bravely provides the police with photos of deleted security footage, proving Richard's culpability. This evidence is the tipping point that finally brings the case to light. But as the investigation reaches its climax, Richard remains calm and composed, confident that he can outmaneuver the system. He tries to destroy evidence, manipulate the truth, and use his position of power to escape accountability. Yet, despite his efforts, the walls are closing in on him. He knows that his time is running out. As the investigation progresses, Helen begins to show signs of life. After 5 long years, she starts to regain consciousness. At first, it is only subtle movements, a slight twitch of her fingers, but then, slowly, her eyes begin to flutter open. Sarah, overwhelmed with emotion, is there at her daughter's side when she wakes up. The joy is mixed with sorrow, as Helen is faced with the harsh reality of her situation. Her body, once her own, now carries the legacy of a brutal assault. Helen's first waking moments are filled with confusion and fear. The hospital room is unfamiliar to her, and the sight of her swollen belly sends a chill through her. She struggles to understand what has happened to her, but it doesn't take long for the pieces to fall into place. The memories of her coma, the dark nights when she could not move, cannot fight, come rushing back to her. The emotional and physical trauma that Helen has endured is overwhelming, but she is determined not to let it define her. With the support of her mother, her best friend Claire, and the police, Helen finds the strength to face her abuser. She agrees to testify against Richard in court, and the evidence against him, DNA, security footage, and Valerie's courageous testimony, leads to his arrest. But Helen's fight is not over. While Richard is taken into custody, she must still contend with the trauma of what he did to her. She faces the difficult reality of being a mother to a child conceived in such horrific circumstances. The baby, though innocent, serves as a constant reminder of the violence she endured. But over time, with the unwavering support of her family and friends, Helen learns to accept her reality. The trial is a battle, but it is one that ends in justice. Richard is convicted and sentenced to life in prison, his reign of terror finally over. For Helen, the journey is far from easy. She has been broken, violated, and betrayed. But through it all, she finds the strength to heal. She begins to rebuild her life, learning to love herself again and to trust in the love of her family. With her mother by her side and her best friend supporting her every step of the way, Helen starts to embrace the future, one small step at a time. Helen's story is a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit. It is a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is hope. With the support of loved ones, the pursuit of justice, and an unwavering will to survive, it is possible to heal from even the most unimaginable trauma. Though the road ahead will be long and fraught with challenges, Helen finds the strength to move forward, not as a victim, but as a survivor. And in doing so, she becomes an inspiration to us all. Helen's story is a chilling tale of victimization, survival, and the long road to justice. It all starts with an unimaginable tragedy, a hit-and-run accident that leaves Helen in a coma, and her life, once filled with dreams and promise, hangs in the balance. Her parents, Sarah and Michael, are left in a state of shock and grief, hoping for their daughter to wake up, but knowing that the clock is ticking against them. Helen's condition is critical, and though doctors do their best, no one can predict when or if she will ever regain consciousness. Her mother, Sarah, becomes a permanent fixture by her daughter's bedside, holding on to hope despite the crushing weight of uncertainty. It is a heartbreaking weight, and as the months turn into years, friends and even some family members begin to fade from their lives, unable to bear the emotional toll of the prolonged vigil. But Sarah remains steadfast, her love for her daughter the only thing keeping her going through the endless nights. Despite the world moving on, Sarah is consumed by the relentless hope that one day her daughter will wake up. As the years pass, life outside the hospital moves on without Helen, and only Sarah and the occasional visits from close friends like Claire continue to show up. The world outside Helen's hospital room continues spinning while she remains in a limbo of life and death. But what no one could have prepared for was the horror that would surface in the form of a shocking discovery. Helen's body, still in a coma, undergoes an inexplicable and frightening change. Nurse Valerie, while conducting a routine checkup, notices something alarming. Helen's abdomen has swollen. At first, Valerie brushes it off, thinking it may be an odd side effect of her medical condition. But after a closer examination and a set of medical tests, the truth is undeniable. Helen is pregnant. This revelation sends shockwaves through the hospital. How could someone in a coma for 5 years become pregnant? The questions swirl, and the horror of the situation begins to unfold. As the investigation begins, the answers grow darker. The medical staff, including doctors and nurses, are questioned, and all eyes turn to Dr. Richard, a respected physician who has been a part of Helen's care team. It soon becomes clear that Richard is not just an innocent bystander in this nightmare, he is the predator. The DNA results confirm that he is the father of the child Helen is carrying. The police begin an investigation into his activities, uncovering his disturbing history. He is not just a trusted doctor, he is a predator who has been taking advantage of his position, using his access to Helen's comatose body to exploit her. His years of manipulation and abuse are exposed, and the investigation into his crimes becomes a race against time to stop him from escaping justice. With every passing hour, the urgency grows. In the midst of this terror, something extraordinary happens. Helen begins to wake up. It is a small, seemingly insignificant gesture at first, the twitch of a finger, the faintest movement of her lips. But slowly, her body begins to respond, and after 5 years of darkness, Helen's eyes flutter open. The joy and relief are immense, but there is also an overwhelming fear. When Helen wakes up, she is confronted not only with the horrors of her past, but also the trauma of her present. She is forced to reckon with the fact that she has been violated in the worst way possible, and the child growing inside her is a constant reminder of her suffering. Sarah, Claire, and the police are there to support her as she processes this devastating reality. Helen's first thoughts are consumed by confusion, then anger, as she struggles to understand how such a thing could have happened to her. Her body, once a source of pride and strength, has been turned into a prison, and the trauma she endures is unimaginable. As she slowly comes to terms with the abuse she suffered, she is forced to face the next horrifying question. What will happen to the child she carries? Can she love it? Can she accept it as part of her future, even though its existence is a painful reminder of the monstrous man who hurt her? The investigation intensifies, and the truth about Dr. Richard's crimes becomes undeniable. Evidence mounts DNA tests, testimonies from other hospital staff, and security footage that has been painstakingly uncovered. It becomes clear that Richard has been exploiting Helen for years, and he is not the only one. Other women have fallen victim to his manipulations, and his actions go beyond mere medical malpractice. His crimes are far worse than anyone could have imagined, and the only thing standing between him and freedom is the testimony of Helen. The process of bringing him to justice is not easy. Despite the mounting evidence, Richard continues to deny his involvement, manipulating the court system and attempting to discredit the DNA results. But Helen is determined to ensure that he faces the consequences of his actions. She agrees to testify in court, despite the deep pain it causes her. She does not want to be the victim any longer. She wants to reclaim her life and take back control from the man who took so much from her. The trial is a battle. Richard's defense team tries to cast doubt on the evidence, claiming that the DNA could have been tampered with or that Helen's memories of the events are unreliable due to her coma. But Helen remains resolute. With her mother by her side and Claire offering unwavering support, Helen stands in the courtroom, facing her abuser for the first time. As she recounts her experiences, the courtroom falls silent. The weight of her testimony is palpable. The jury hears not just the words, but the pain behind them, and the truth becomes undeniable. After a tense deliberation, the jury delivers its verdict. Richard is guilty of multiple counts of abuse, assault, and tampering with evidence. He is sentenced to life in prison, and the courtroom erupts in applause. Justice has been served, and Richard will never hurt anyone again. But even after the conviction, Helen's journey is far from over. The trauma she has endured is not something that can be easily erased. Though Richard's punishment is a step toward closure, it is clear that the road to healing will be long and fraught with challenges. Helen struggles to find peace with herself, particularly when it comes to the child she carries. The overwhelming emotions of anger, fear, and shame cloud her ability to connect with the baby, but over time, with the support of her family, she begins to find the strength to move forward. She starts to rebuild her life, slowly but surely. She finds moments of peace, even joy, as she navigates the complex emotions of motherhood, knowing that this child, though conceived in trauma, is an innocent soul deserving of love and care. Helen's story is ultimately one of transformation. It is about reclaiming agency and choosing not to be defined by past trauma. Though the road ahead is filled with obstacles, Helen is determined to face them. She knows that she is stronger than she ever realized, and with each passing day, she becomes more confident in her ability to overcome the challenges life throws her way. Helen's resilience is a powerful reminder that, even in the face of unimaginable suffering, it is possible to rebuild, to heal, and to create a future that is filled with hope and purpose. Helen's story offers profound lessons on resilience, the power of truth, and the importance of standing up for what is right. Life may present unimaginable hardships, but it is how we face these trials that shapes our future. Helen's journey shows that, even after experiencing severe trauma, one can reclaim their strength and voice. No matter how dark the past may be, there is always an opportunity for healing, transformation, and growth. The story also teaches the value of support from family and friends. Helen was not alone in her battle. Her mother, Claire, and others stood by her, providing the love and encouragement she needed to keep going. In times of hardship, it's vital to lean on the people who care for us and allow them to help us heal. Most importantly, the story emphasizes that the truth will eventually come to light, no matter how deeply it's buried. Even in the face of overwhelming fear, courage, and persistence can lead to justice and closure. For those who have faced adversity, like Helen, it is a reminder that it is never too late to stand tall, take control of your life, and find peace. Healing is a journey that may take time, but with the right support and determination, it is always possible. Thank you for watching this powerful story of survival and strength. If you found it impactful, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Stories TH so you can stay up to date with more powerful content like this. Your support means the world to us.